Hello everyone, welcome to Green Chat. We're going to take a closer look at an upcoming MMO, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. My name is Cleeze, and let's get started. Hey guys, hope you had a good week. Today's episode is just like most episodes where you guys can ask me questions and I give you my opinion to hopefully formulate your own on Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. Today we have a couple of comments we're going to cover from you guys, and then we're going to jump back into, I've decided to call them points of interest as far as Pantheon's concerned and stuff like that. And also, my wife is behind me and doing a little magical stuff on her keyboard and stuff. So if you hear anything like that, like somebody jumping on a horse, there isn't a horse in my house. It's just my wife riding a horse in a game. All right, so now that that is all known, we will start off with our comments for this week. So first up, I'd like to cover a comment from Zach Kelly. He's going on about the epicness, which I spoke last week. He really worded this well, and I love his analogy. I'm just going to throw it in here real quick. Basically, MMOs right now, it's like going to the movies, and all you have is Transformers, the Avengers, and Black Panther, Iron Man, Spider-Man. That's your only options at the movies, guys. That's kind of the way MMOs feel right now. You go to the MMOs, you've got, that's it, boom. I'm sure there's other MMOs out, like RuneScape maybe, or I know, what is it, Tibia, Project 99 still out there. I guess you could almost consider Dark Souls kind of MMO-y. I mean, not MMO-y, but I mean, sort of. I mean, you know, at some level, it's where you draw the line on that one. But I guess it's not massive. But anyway, yeah, that's the way I was. The way he worded it was much better than I worded it. I just wanted to throw it in there. Basically, you go to the movies, you got one option. Really boring. Have more options, please. I guess that's what I was kind of, what I'm fed up with. Not fed up with. What, you know, it's like eating spaghetti every night. Where's the meatballs, man? All right, so next up we have two comments here. One's from Danos138 and one's from Janic34. Danos138 saying games today are even more simple. There was depth and complexity in older games, simply put. Janic34 is saying something along the lines of, it's kind of a longer post, so I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit, as I usually do. Sorry. I don't think it has to do with your age, wanting instant gratification. MMOs are built differently than it was 20 years ago. Or 20 years ago. It's just the games that the generations have grown up with. If you're a young person that plays WoW, they are used to that type of game, and they haven't ever had a chance to experience anything like Pantheon. I'd imagine once they play something like this and they get the feeling of the community and hard work for rewards, I think they'll be just in love with it as we were when we grew up with these games like EverQuest and Final Fantasy XI. So both of those comments are kind of riding on the backs of that's the way games are today. Maybe they'll like it when they get in there and they actually get a flavor for this. So I'm going to kind of bundle these two questions together as far as Pantheon goes. I would agree with JNick34. I think when people jump into Pantheon, they're going to find that they love it because the type of game it is, if it's going to be anything like its predecessors, which it's looking like that's going to be the case, those games are just super awesome and engaging, and they really have a way of sucking you into their environment and the social community. It's a solid block of cheese. And then Danos138 saying games today are even more simple. There was depth and complexities in older games. I don't know. I mean, yes and no. So I'm gonna not rebound, but we're gonna move forward and kind of combine this with. So one thing I do on my previous videos is when I run out of questions, which that's all we had. The only comments I had for this week was those three. Those three? 1, 2, 3? Yes. So what I do is I like to find posts on the forums that are really old. I know it's kind of necro, you know, bringing them back to life. But they have relevance to the game even in the present, I think, and for the community to know about it if they're interested in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. So I'm going to start calling them points of interest as far as Pantheon's concerned and development. So with their two comments, also there was a forum thread post. So the point of interest or post reads as such. Taladar saying, the biggest reason MMOs are easy, and I think this really goes well with JNick34 and what Danos138 is saying. What Taladar is saying, I realize there are many factors in what have made current MMOs easy, but I think I figured out the biggest reason why they're easy today. With the combination of allowing you to scroll your camera out 150 yards into the air, combined with spell lines that show wherever a spell is going to be cast, so you know the exact spot you have to move out before the spell is even cast. What do you guys think? So a lot of people respond with like the internet or add-ons or whatever the case may be. So with those two comments and reading that post, it got me thinking, what does it really mean to be an instant gratification player? Or what do those players, why would somebody say a game is easy or hard or anything like that? And why does it even exist, and why does it come up so much? So I thought it'd be interesting if I did a little math. I used to play a lot of World of Warcraft, so I use that for an example because I know where to find all the data and stuff. So I kind of guessed. I said, let's say WoW has 4 million subscribers right now. I think it's probably guaranteed it's probably more than that. They just released a new little tricky doohickey like pre-expansion thing, so probably more than that right now. But let's just say that's the sample size. So even on the back end of an expansion, when the raids are more easy, the most difficult content in the game, I went through and basically if your character completes something, it posts it in that character's armory. That'll, data miners will eat that up, post it to sites to get rankings and stuff like that. So what I did was I took all the top guilds that have completed every most difficult raid, and then I added up how many people would take per raid group to complete that content. And then I divided that number of people that have beat the game, pretty much defeated the most, not beat the game, but completed the most difficult raid against the population of WoW to get a number or percentage of what percentage of WoW players have defeated the most difficult encounter, to kind of combat, or not combat, but lean against, sorry, I hit the mic, but to lean against what people would say, or when they do say that current MMOs are easy. So interestingly enough, 0.0015% of the population of WoW have defeated the most difficult content. So that would lead me to believe that the content in WoW is extremely hard, probably more difficult than it's ever been, or at least on that level. So when people say instant gratification crowd, stuff like that, if you went and played World of Warcraft today, you would find an amped challenge in some facet of the game. Other facets might be easy, and other facets might not, or whatever you want to call it. I don't even know if facet's a word. I hope you enjoy that. But I thought it was kind of interesting. So, them lighting up the ground or stuff like that, obviously it doesn't make it easier because World of Warcraft does that, and they found a way to make it challenging. And yes, games today are even more simple. I think WoW is more simple as far as like, is this PC gear better for me? Or Final Fantasy for that matter, because literally it's like only this class can use it. But there was more depth and complexity in older games. I think there was depth and complexity in different like areas, and there was a lot more room for you to discover things, which I think was really neat. In older games, there was a lot more of discovery on your part because you couldn't just go online and find it majority of the time, where people wouldn't take the time to make guides, stuff like that. And that goes along with the populations that play these games. So, just how does that translate into Pantheon now? I think Pantheon, what they're going to try to do is make it their goal to not make the end of the game 0.15% is their bracket of interest for their target hardcore group that's going to complete every raid in the game and be like, I'm amazing, and get all the skill trees up and all that, not skill trees, but all the crafting and stuff like that. I think what they're going to do is kind of more even it out as far as, smashing some of the difficulty back down into leveling experience, back down into that level 30 dungeon, level 20, quest that you've got to go on that's super awesome, or whatever the case may be. I think that's what I would expect more from Pantheon. So you'll have a more instant gratification. I think that's why a lot of people get burnt out in current games, is it's so easy for a really long time, and then all of a sudden it gets super challenging, or maybe even it graduates to that point, but just getting to that point is not satisfying. And then when you're not in the heat of the moment, you're doing super easy stuff, or it's not easy to sit there and camp something there's different levels of easy. There could be challenging, like you have to dodge stuff, and then maybe somebody's like camping to get like a rare pet drop because they do pet battles or something, and they're sitting there camping that for 2 days straight. That's very difficult to do. Basically, that's what I think you guys should expect, or what I would expect from Pantheon, is to have a more playing field that is even across the board. When you log in at level 1, it's going to be challenging at level 10. You're going to have an engaging experience, because it's not engaging it for it to be easy. I think that's where this whole thing's popping up, versus just when you get higher and they can just really put the heat on you, and because I think what they want these days is they don't want to drive their customers off that are terrible at these games. That might sound terrible that I'm saying that, but you know, they want you to log in and invest a lot of time before you start getting killed every 2 seconds. You know, where Pantheon will start killing you right away because that's fun. I mean, that's not fun, but that creates a more real environment. A dangerous environment is exciting. You know, it's exciting to be like, oh gosh, I might die. Versus like, okay, I'm just gonna pull all this stuff up, die, whatever. Or, oh, I need to get to the other side of this field through all those giants. This looks really scary, and they're vibrating the ground as they walk. I'm just gonna run and die and run and die and run and die to the other side. You know, cool, man. Where in Pantheon, you really won't be able to achieve that. Where in other games, it's kind of like, you know, it's like it doesn't really matter. All right, next up we have a post from Angry Kids, as I'm calling them points of interest. Points of interest. Hopefully that sticks. It sounds kind of dumb now that I've gotten this far with it, which is like 2 comments. Anyway, so Angry Kids is going out about what he'd like to see is all stats viable for every class. Basically, I would think it'd be interesting if all stats could have meaning for all classes. Basically, a warrior could use int, a rogue could use int, a caster could use int. His example, or one example he has is if a warrior casts like an AE taunt, int would play a factor in how well that taunt goes off. You know, because it takes intelligence to insult a bunch of people at the same time. It takes a lot of effort. Forever. Anyway, so now what games have been doing is right now anyways, is kind of trending in this direction. Not so much making every stat viable for every class, but making gear kind of flip. So if you're a strength-based character, strength will be on the gear, and then if you put it on a int-based character that wears plate as well, it'll be int, or intellect will show up, or wisdom, or whatever stat is rolling with the game. That's one thing World of Warcraft did, and then Final Fantasy is still kind of sticking with just one class, one item kind of deal, or very few classes, one item, or jobs. Sorry guys. So what I think this would be cool. So in older games, intellect would almost play a factor in, let's use EverQuest for example. You've got a lot of stats in that game, and they would not so much play a role, but you wouldn't necessarily have that stat on the gear. And I'm kind of a fan. I think what we used to be in the environment of there'd be a lot of stats all over the place for each class, and it'd get rather confusing sometimes as far as what is actually good for you, or at least for newer players, what's actually good for you. So I'm personally not a fan of every stat viable for each class. It's kind of nice going in there knowing that, like, okay, this modifier affects this, or these stats affect that, and having that very transparent versus you trying to guess and figure it out, or, you know, having 2 points of intellect once you reach 30 intellect, or having, you know, 2 points of strength now that we're at 10 strength, so it's 12 to 32. What's better here and there, and having to make those decisions if it was really clear cut. Strength's good, stamina is good, or yeah, well, stamina, I was gonna say constitution, but you know, find a way to juggle those stats, make you ponder what item's better, but don't necessarily make it, you know, complicated to say who is the person in this group that would benefit the most from this piece of gear. The bard, the enchanter, the warrior, the cleric, or the rogue. Having that being the deciding factor, I think is more, usually gets more frustrating than not frustrating, but complicated when you're trying to have a loot distribution, you know, situation going on, or who should roll on what, or what's good for who. Because it's nice to know. It's nice to know, oh, this is an awesome warrior two-hander and an awesome rogue bracelets or bracers or rings or stuff like that. Or, you know, this dagger is really awesome for wizards and for rogues because it has this amazing attack delay. Whatever people come up with, just something to think about. But personally, all stats being viable I think is cool, but not necessarily in every type of facet. So it'd be cool like if in skill crafting your stats came into play in a different way than they did with your adventure mode or when you're running around killing stuff. So to sum that guy up, I'm pretty sure I would hope that Pantheon, I have a feeling that Pantheon will bring a lot of stats into play in combat and in trade skills and in harvesting and stuff like that. But every stat being viable, I don't think they'll go that route. Some people might think that's cool. I personally don't, but I think that can create a lot of, make an easy road to a lot of confusion for players and items just in general. Just itemizing the game can make things more complicated than not having every stat viable. Next up, we have another point of interest from Two Heart. Two Heart is saying he's got a small concern. This is worded a little weird. I'm going to do my best to read it. Can this happen the way Pantheon is envisaged to work? I think he means envisioned to work. Me and my group go into a dungeon. We get a boss. We get to the last boss and get him down to X% health, and he wipes us. Along comes another group and finishes him off and walks away with the loot, question mark. So, Two Heart and everybody else, what can this mean for us? I would say 100%. You could be getting a boss down to 1% life. You could wipe. Somebody could literally step in there and boom, kill him. Now, I think what happens when you do wipe, there's a reset that occurs and they regen health pretty quickly. So if they're trying to hawk swoop in there and take, I just call it hawk swooping, but if they're trying to sneak in there and take your kill, first off, you're gonna probably know they're there and doing it, because usually when you're camped in an area, you have a scout that's running around checking out camps or spawns and stuff like that. So you usually know who's around you, and it's not so like, oh my gosh, these people just snuck up on me. Where did they come from? That usually just doesn't happen for some reason. It just doesn't. So, I mean, it can though. It can happen. So it can happen, and the boss will reset. His health will go down, but if they're prepared, they can definitely get in there and do it. Now, that kind of goes against, not goes against, but usually in instances like this in most MMOs, you can put tickets in if people are grief camping you like this, or ninja camping you in this instance, kind of waiting for you to fail and then just jumping in there and taking it. That's not cool. So there's things you can do, not to say that would solve your issue, but that's part of this game. That's part of something you will definitely have to deal with. Now, they might put something into the game to cope. They might put something into the game to cope with that, but I would very much likely see something like that in the game. I'm actually talking to you like you asked me this question. Sorry, I just realized it's a point of interest. So guys, this will definitely be a part of Pantheon, is you're going to be in there. If you do fail and there's people being tricky Mickey in the corner, you'll potentially have to lose out on that. So now, another thing that's kind of interesting that a lot of people might not know is, in other games, your game's present. If there's a named mob, it'll usually always drop a piece of loot, where now there will be named mobs, and then there'll be placeholders that take the place of those named mobs, so you can camp a spot, and this spot can potentially spawn in like a lich or something, and then sometimes it'll spawn as just a regular skeleton. And then when the lich spawns, he'll also have a different loot table, so he'll drop different items, 1 through 5, for example, 1 being the most rare, 5 being the most common. So then you have to get the lich to spawn, and then you have to get the lich to drop the item. So it's not always guaranteed once you actually get the encounter in your favor, where you're actually fighting the mob that you want, that you'll actually get the loot you want. So, when that's another thing, if they're coming in trying to take your stuff, it might not be a big deal, but typically that's really frowned upon, and they will have to deal with that as a consequence. As far as if you are a respected player in your social circles, and you say, hey, these guys just came in and swooped our camp, people will be like, oh my god, what guild are they in? What's their names? And then, you know, before you know it, people love drama. Drama's great. I personally really love drama. And it spreads like wildfire. So, is that camp, stealing that camp, worth it? Probably usually not. But it can definitely happen to you. It can happen to you. Or it's up to you to prevent camp stealing. Our last point of interest is a UI discussion. Alex Wright is asking us as a community what he thinks, or what we think would be the best type of UI for Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. So I actually have a lot of opinion here. I've raid led and been a major component in guilds for close to around 10 or 11 years now. I mean, when my son was born, I kind of really took like 18,000 steps back. But so the one thing I found is, when I was trialing people or dealing with people or running into issues with players or stuff like that, I'd say 90% of the time their issues could have been solved with a UI change, or being better at dealing with their UI, or be better at customizing their UI to them. So I really like how Final Fantasy does it, is that they have a base UI. You can move stuff around, you can get all crazy with it, but they don't allow you to customize a lot like WoW does, where you can completely change the UI if you have the ability to do so. And usually games do really well with that if they have a really large community, because the community makes those mods. And then at some points, WoW or games like WoW will look to the community as far as actually making that a part of the default UI if it's a really great idea, which I think is really neat. But so Pantheon has stated they're going to have a pretty basic UI, or what you would expect from a UI from their caliber of game, which I think what they're referring to is EverQuest / Vanguard. So you're going to have hotbars, party frames, all the usual jazz you have, you know, raid frames, health bars, mana bars for each player, however you want to do that. You can probably have some tweaking and customization there too. But I really hope they stick with the default UI, or a UI. Sorry, mustache. I just kind of trimmed it. It's all jacked. I really hope they stick with a UI that is uniform across players, and it makes it so much easier when you're dealing with things between players, because you know exactly what they're looking at, and you are looking at exactly the same thing. Now, you know, I know a lot of people like to customize their stuff and stuff like that, and I know previous games have like overlays and stuff like that where you can make it more customized in your direction, but I would expect them to allow that, but they can change, or they can restrict what you can actually modify and how greatly you can modify things. What can you actually capture from the logs? I mean, there is always a way around everything. You can have programs that, you know, like ACT and stuff like that, read your like volatile RAM. You can't get around that really, and then, you know, whatever. Let's not even go there. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it doesn't matter. But basically, if you wanted to make mods for the game, you're gonna do it, and people are gonna find ways to do it if they really want to. But I think it's really cool that when people don't. I think damage meters are cool, like stuff like that. I don't think they're cool, but I think they're useful. I know a lot of people hate damage meters, but if that would be part of the UI, that'd be really neat, like some kind of component of the UI, or at least let the combat log readable to do a damage meter. You know, I'm not even gonna go into damage meters. I ain't gonna even go into damage meters. You know what, we'll save the damage meters for a later time. That's a super heated topic, but I personally think they're pretty awesome as far as rating goes and stuff like that. They're a useful tool. But anyway, I would expect a very default UI or a default layout in Pantheon, much like you'd see in any game you jump into right now, as their default goes. And I think that's cool, and I know they're going to allow some modification. What that modification is yet to be seen, and I will keep you guys posted and updated on what that might be in the future. Alright guys, with that, we're going to call it there. If you enjoyed what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe to get any notifications for future uploads. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again really soon.